Welcome to the last tutorial in our series of getting familiar with the Adobe Connect environment. This tutorial is going to focus on the interaction with the students. It is going to be utilizing the Who's Here pod, the Chat pod, and also the Screen Share options. So when you are interacting with students, we know that we can share out our screen, but there are going to be some situations where you may need to be able to do more directly or deal more directly with the students. With a lot of our classes, the Microsoft Office classes for example, when a student is having difficulty in a lab, you are able to go into LMS and say that you want to monitor the labs, and that way you can see what's going on inside of their lab environment. But some classes that we offer do not have labs that are built and set up through LMS. So for example, some of our Adobe classes actually have to use either a live application or a go to my PC type solution to be able to participate in the class. So we do not have that built-in monitoring feature to be able to see what the student is seeing on their screen. So for that purpose, we do have the ability to request a screen share from the student. So I can use the Who's Here pod as a way to say I would like to see your screen, and then they can accept that from their end, and I'm going to then be able to actually see what's going on their screen. You may also want to interact with students privately, or the students may want to interact with you privately using the chat feature as well. So we're going to take a look at the request screen control. It's not that much different than the share my screen that we talked about from our previous tutorial. So one of the things that we mentioned is that if I go to say share my screen and I indicate what it is that I want to share, the student is able to see what I am presenting, right? So right now I've got Word open, so they are able to see that. But if I go in here and I start typing something, you can see that, the text is kind of small, and the student may be having difficulty seeing that. So they have features on their end that we discussed in our previous tutorial that allows them to zoom in or zoom out to get a better view of what we are seeing or what we are doing here. But since for this tutorial you want to be able to see that as well, because the instructor doesn't see that. They only see what the instructor presents. So in our request screen share, we actually get to flip the roles in a sense, so that we as the instructor become the student, where we can actually see what the student is sharing with us. So I'm going to jump out of my screen share and stop sharing my screen. So now if I wanted to see what the student was doing, the student is having some difficulty working on a particular exercise that we're doing. So all I have to do is come over here to my Who's Here pod, and I can go to the name of the student that I want to interact with. So when I mouse over the name of that student, early on when we were getting familiar with some of the different pods, you saw the options to be able to start a private chat, enable the microphone for that student, video, drawing, and then you have your request screen share. So if I say request screen share, they are sent a message that says that I would like to see it, and they have the option to either start the screen share or decline it. If they don't acknowledge it within a certain amount of time, let's say maybe 5-15 seconds, something in that range, it automatically comes back as declined. If they are having difficulty seeing it, then you may want to let them know that the message usually pops up in the top right hand corner of the Adobe Connect environment. Now, just like what we saw when we are sharing out our screen, they are presented with an option that says, do you want to share your primary monitor or your secondary monitor if they have two, or just the one monitor. They also can choose an application or a window. So the student is being asked which monitor, so they're going to go ahead and say to share their first or primary monitor. And so it's processing. So right now you can see that nothing is really on display except for the desktop. So if they switch to the application that we want to take a look at, Now, if it's on their second monitor, you may also have to instruct the student that they are going to need to pull it to the monitor that they are currently sharing if they didn't know which monitor to select. So you can see that if I move this over onto the primary monitor, now you as the instructor are able to see what they are sharing. So if the problem was that they didn't have a file open, you can now instruct them what they're supposed to be doing. Just like when we do our screen share as the instructor, the student is also given that mini control panel. One other thing to point out about requesting a screen share with a student is that in order for them to be able to do a screen share, they have to have the Adobe Connect plugin. So when you send that request to the student, it's going to first of all bring up the request where they can either start the screen share or decline it, or it'll give them the message, or I should say, and it'll give them the message that says that they need to install the plugin. The plugin takes a moment to install, and once it's installed, it automatically kicks into the screen share. So they also have the mini control that they can maximize or leave minimized. And then so now I can tell them what I want to do. Now, just like what we were talking about before, since now I am the participant in this screen share, you can see that at the top you have your little buttons that I was referring to on the slide from earlier. So you have zoom in and then scale to fit, or basically the same as zoom out. So if they go in and we tell them to go ahead and create a new document, and we say go ahead and create a blank document, and they start typing, so you can see how, based on our current perspective, that text seems kind of small. It could be difficult to see exactly what it is that they're typing. So the student, or now us as the instructor, has the ability to zoom in to get a better look at that. So I can come up here and I can click my zoom in, and you see that it's going to automatically zoom in to where the cursor or the mouse is. So when they're doing it for you or you're doing it for them, it's the same way. Wherever your cursor or your mouse is, that's where the zoom is going to take you. So if the student moves their mouse up to the File tab, you can see how it's zoomed over to the left. If they come over here to the Find and Replace options, you can see how it's zoomed over to the right. So no matter where your cursor goes, or in this case their cursor goes, you're going to be able to follow them around without you feeling like you have to sit there and drag left or drag right or up or down. Okay? Now, from the participant point of view, if I want to zoom back out so I can see the full screen again, or what's being shared at least, I can click the zoom out button. Now, as the instructor, one of the things that we will have in this view that the student would not have normally is request control. So if you are trying to instruct a student on how to do something or where a feature is, and they're just having a really difficult time of getting it or not getting it to work or anything like that, we may want to see if we can help out even further. So we can ask them, you know, is it okay if I step in and help you out a little bit here? So if I do that, or if they say yes, then I can say request control. So the student again is being asked, is this okay? And they're going to see options of either accept or decline. If they don't respond in a certain amount of time, it automatically is declined. If they accept, then now you are in control. So I can come up here oops, I can minimize that. So I can go into Word and I can click on the different tabs of the ribbon. So if I wanted to insert a picture, I might want to go ahead and move down to a new line, and then I could say insert a we'll do a shape. So we'll say insert shapes, select the shape that I want to insert, click and drag to create my shape. And then if I wanted to explain to them how they can manipulate it, they're having difficulty with that, then I can say, okay, you can take the little diamond there and adjust it. So I'm actually able to take over the reins so that they can get a better idea of what it is that I'm trying to show them or tell them what to do. Once they think that they've got it, or I've shown them what I need to show them and I think they're ready to take back over, or they think they're ready to take back over, then I can relinquish control of their environment. So I can come back up here and you'll see the button that says release control. And so now you see a message that says that I no longer have control of the screen. So when I try to click on anything up here, nothing happens. But the student is going to be able to pick back up. You can also see in this view, since we're still looking at their screen, that this cursor that you see moving around is the default Adobe Connect cursor. So I said earlier in a previous video that that's the one that looks like a little person attached to an arrow. So that's not the cursor that they're seeing, but that's the cursor that you're seeing. So unless they go into their preferences and say to show the application cursor, you are not going to see their actual cursor, just like they won't see yours. All right? Now, once you are done viewing their screen, or they are done sharing their screen with you, they need to stop sharing. Since they're the one in control for the most part, you can tell them that they can go back into Adobe Connect and click back on the button in the middle of the screen that says to stop sharing. Now, again, this could be difficult for them. They might not know exactly what you're talking about, or they may not be able to see it. So if they are having difficulty, then you can also do that from your end as well. So to revoke screen share permissions, all I have to do is mouse over their name again back inside of my Who's Here pod, and where before it said enable screen share, now I've got revoke screen share. So you can see that now they're no longer sharing out their screen and you are back in control. All right? Now, another thing that you may need to do as far as interacting with a student, and it could be because the student isn't there, period. Or a common situation that we see is that sometimes people get a little click happy when they are starting up their classroom environment and they click on the launch class button more than once or twice or 3 times. And so you may indicate or see that a student is listed in your classroom 2, 3, 4 times. All right? So if you have tried to explain to them that they have opened up their classroom more than once and they need to close one, sometimes that's also a task that's difficult for them. So to help them out, you can go in and mouse over the name of the student and select it, because you're not going to see any options for that here in this little pop-up menu. But if you click on the name of the student, you can go up here to your options in the Who's Here, and you can say to remove the selected user. So if a student has entered the classroom 2 or 3 times, you can select their duplicates and remove them. It's always a good idea to ask them first, because there are some students that do not have dual monitors that will log into the classroom twice on 2 different computers. So you want to make sure that that's not what the situation is, so that you don't take away one of their logins. Now, the other scenario where you might use this is when you've got a student that maybe showed up at the beginning of class, they're logged in, shows that they're present, but they have not been responding. Anytime you ask for a green thumbs up, you don't see anything. Anytime you try to communicate with them directly, they don't respond. They never opened up their labs, or they opened up their lab and never did anything with it, and they just seem to have disappeared. So as far as the classroom is concerned, they're here, but otherwise they don't seem to be. So if you've gone through and kind of made sure that you've covered all of your bases, you may want to go ahead and remove that student from the class. Same process. You select the name of the student, you come up here to your options menu, and then you say remove selected user. All right? Another thing that you may want to do with your students, or the students may want to do with you, is to conduct a private chat. Now, for the most part, chat is seen by everyone, which in a classroom environment is a good thing, because just like if we were actually in a classroom, we'd all be interacting and participating together. But as I like to say, sometimes there might be questions or situations that come up that aren't for everybody else's eyes and or ears, and so a student may want to ask you a question or discuss an issue with you privately. So to start a private chat with anyone, regardless if you're a student or an instructor, All you have to do is mouse over the name of the student that you want to chat privately with and say to start private chat. So this could also go back to the situation where you have a student that seems to be present in the classroom but is not interacting or participating or doing anything as far as the class is concerned. So if you want to kind of try to communicate with them off to the side so that other people don't see that you're trying to figure out what their situation is, private chat's a perfect way to do that. So anything that you put into this private chat, you'll see that a new tab opens up here at the bottom of your chat window, and the only people that are going to see that conversation is you and that student. Now, students, unless you disable this feature, can also do private chat with other students. So if you had two coworkers that wanted to communicate privately, they could. Right? But we do have the settings or preferences that you could go into through your preferences in the meeting menu and say to disable that feature. But it is on by default. To close out of a private chat that you have been doing, all you have to do is go to the tab, mouse over it, get the little X to appear in the corner, and then click, and that closes out of that tab. So this short video has kind of gone through and shown you various ways that you can interact with the student using the Who's Here pod, the screen share, requesting a screen share, revoking a screen share, and then also working with the private chat features. We've talked about being able to assign permissions or grant permissions to be able to do a screen share or to have them take over, or for you to be able to take over during a screen share, ways for you to be able to zoom in and zoom out while you are working in a screen share, not only from the student point of view, but also from the instructor point of view when a student is sharing their screen with you. So I hope this last tutorial has been informative and given you some more insight into how you can work with the Who's Here, the chat, and the screen share as a way to be able to interact with your students. Thank you very much.